Landing craft. Those were smaller craft that went right on. Of course, the LSTs went right on the beach too, but the LCTs took the tanks, the amphibious tanks.
Heavy equipment.
Yes, we took them right on into the beach. We got there the night before.
So, the night before?
Yes. We went out on June the 5th,
Right.
okay? And the weather was so bad we had to turn back.
Right.
Next day was June the 6th. Well, we went out that night and stayed. Because what happened, the weather was so bad, we had what they call amphibious tanks. We had 32 LCTs in the flotilla, and each one of those ships had 4 of those Sherman tanks, which weighed 30 to 32 ton. 4 of them on those little ships. And we was out there in this heavy waves and storm trying to get those things on into Normandy. And that's the only support that Big Red One, and the 69th Division, that's the only support they had was those tanks. But like I say, the tanks, they just sunk. They were so heavy.
Well, there, D-Day, I got there at 6 o'clock in the morning,
6 o'clock in the morning.
and we had the 29th Infantry, the
29th,
Division,
yeah,
on our ship.
yeah.
And the small boats that we had carried the 29th, or the infantry went into the beach. We couldn't land on the beach right away because it wasn't secure. Plus they had all these obstacles there with mines all over the place. So it was that night, I don't remember right offhand, but it was that evening when they got it cleared, so we come in with our tanks and the rest of the personnel.
3 companies of the 2nd Ranger Battalion went to the cliffs.
Okay.
And half of them never made it to the cliff. Never made it into shore. We didn't get to the cliffs until the 2nd day.
Second day?
No,
Yeah.
we went into the right of them.
Oh,
Left
okay.
of them, I mean. And we were forced to come in the back.
What did you,
We were being fired upon all the time I was there by German 88s. They were the most fearful gun that the Germans had, and they sunk a lot of ships, plus they killed a lot of people. One thing that did happen, an LST was going to, well, we were going to come in on the beach, and there was an LST in back of us. We couldn't get our anchor up to come into the beach, and this other LST would come around us and was heading for the beach, and they hit a mine. And it split in half, and it went in the air and come down. And that night, there was over 500 or 600 dead soldiers and sailors wounded that came in with the tide on the beach. It was a massacre.
Well, that same 88, when we couldn't get those amphibious tanks in to support that Big Red One, they used destroyers. They used the Corey and the Fitch that I know of. Well, that USS Corey was the ship that I trained on for my gunner's mate, for my petty officer's rank. That Corey and that Fitch made runs up and down that beach, just firing their 5-inch guns. Now that beach in Normandy was 20 miles long, from the beginning at the English and the French at their beach on up to Utah and Omaha, the American beaches, and the Canadians. That's 20 miles long, and those 2 destroyers went back and forth. On about the 4th or 5th trip, that Corey was coming up, and that got hit by an 88.
Do you remember the 88s coming at you?
Yes, sir. I hear them every once in a while.
Yeah.
But,
One other thing I was going to tell you. I picked up a fella on the beach that I went to school with. He was shot through the leg. And we had to go out and pick up the wounded because we used to carry back a lot of wounded back to England.
so did we.
And so I reached down, and he was all bloody. His leg was all bloody and sandy and stubble. And he looked at me. I didn't recognize him. He says, "Hello, Julie."
Wow.
I was the guy who I went to school with. I still got the caption
Man.
back from the newspapers back in
This-
Cobleskill.
Yeah.
That,
Wow.
recorded it. That's something,
On that beach,
yeah.
there was thousands of guys,
Oh, yeah,
you know, and to
Yeah.
run into something like that.
yeah.
it-
Another thing, during the Battle of the Bulge, I wasn't in the Battle of the Bulge, but our LSTs could go up the Seine River. We brought reinforcements up the Seine River into Rouen. I don't know if any of you fellas remember
Yeah,
the city
yeah.
of Rouen, but we brought in half tracks and infantry. Some of the Seine River is wide in some spots, and some spots it was very narrow, and the LSTs just barely get through. And the French people would be handing us bread and calvados and cognac, flowers, as we were going up the Seine River. And anyway, they were very thankful that we were there. But we helped bring supplies into the people that were fighting in the Battle of the Bulge. And furthermore, my brother was wounded in the Battle of Bulge.
Serious?
I've heard,
Pardon?
Was it serious wound?
Yeah, oh yeah, he got shot. He was behind an army tank, and they were throwing those hammers, hand grenades. It
Yes.
was like a stick. It just whirled.
Yes.
He got hit. He was right behind the tank and got hit. And he took his shoes off and his heel, and he had trouble with his heel for many, many years.
They're terrible.
Then I had another brother who was wounded in Anzio. He got shot through the face and come out back of his neck. He was in the hospital 2.5 years. But he lived another 20 years afterwards and he passed
My
away.
buddy was in the B-24. He was a waist gunner.
Yeah,
And they had those little seats that they sit in.
yeah.
On
You had to be
waist.
small to get in there.
Yes. Well, a round come up,
this is,
went through that steel seat,
This is good. You
and
got
took
it.
half of his spine off.
Oh my God.
Well, he lived probably 10 or 15 years,
Yeah.
but he always had infections, and he was sick every time that you turn around. He
Yeah.
was sick, and eventually, actually, he died from that
Oh,
that
sure.
round that hit him.
Sure.
So when it come up, it hit that seat, and the round just disintegrated, and all that went up and into his
Oh, yeah.
spine.
Oh,
But,
sure.
we took probably thousands of prisoners.
later though,
Yes.
later.
Yeah, with later on, that, they didn't seem to know anything or want to know.